All right, so we are here because ELA writing has some unique requirements, different from the core concepts. So if you came to the core concepts, you know that was we talked about things like data charts and brief descriptions. So this ELA writing is about expressive communication, and they have different requirements for that. So let us start with what exactly it is, because when we hear ELA writing, many of us think, wait a minute, my student can't write. I can't do that. But we're going to talk about expressive communication. How are students able to share their experiences, to talk about their preferences, maybe think of new ideas and give us some facts, perhaps discuss books that they like or that you read, articles, videos. Poetry and imagery works so well with our students. And then for them to be able to share that knowledge with an audience like their peers or their family. What ELA writing does not assess is the student's ability to hold an instrument, a writing instrument. That's not what we're looking for. Or copying letters, and definitely not tracing over letters or words. I am asking you not to do that to the students. If they have given you information and you write it for them, please don't make them trace over it or recopy it. Leave that for the OTs. You want to get as much information from our students as possible. So, what is your student's primary mode of communication? We have a long list here. I'm sure that when you look at it, you can find some way in which your student communicates. Do they speak? Are they able to write? Do they make sounds? Do they use symbols? Perhaps objects? Maybe they make gestures. Do they use sign language? Eye gaze? Do they use a high tech or low tech device? So you need to know how your student communicates in order to assess them with expressive communication. We need to assess them. They have to have some form of communication. So let's take a look at the requirements for writing. First of all, just like if you were at the core concepts, every strand needs a skill survey. So you're going to have one skill survey for the writing, one baseline, and this baseline is like the student's first attempt. And if they're able to write, it could actually be writing, or if they're going to tell you and you're going to scribe, it's just a baseline. It can be a brainstorming activity. You can do an outline, a draft, graphic organizer, but it's that first attempt, and that should be dated before your other final samples. You're going to have 3 different final writing samples, and there'll be different topics. If you're using photographs or pictures, you want those to be different pictures. You need to have 3 pre-scored state-provided rubrics, and that's one for each of those final samples. And then those final writing samples, just like all the other evidence, is going to include the student's name, a valid date, and the percentage of independence. And that's going to be based on a word or sentence. You notice I didn't say you need accuracy and independence. I just said you need the percentage of independence. The final sample for students using access skills, if your student's using access skills, you're still going to need a written product. And that can be produced by the teacher or by peers. And you're just going to capture the student's participation in that creation. And we'll show you some examples. And at the end, Kevin will show you how this all works in forms and graphs. So here's our ELA writing skills survey. And as you can see, it's set up the same as the other ones with A, B, C, D, or E. And you're just going to fill this out. And if you read it carefully, it'll tell you exactly what you need to know for your student. Fill it out accordingly, and then you will put it behind your strand cover sheet. You're going to look to see where your student needs the most help Usually you can find it in the B's or sometimes the C, but you might want to stay with the B's and see if you can find something that the student isn't able to do that you want to work on and assess. And this is just a visual of all the required elements. So for some of you who like to have uh, a visual, I always like to see what does it look like completed. So in this case, you have your skill survey, then a work description for the baseline, and then your baseline writing. In this case, the student was able to write. Then we have 3 work description labels, right? One for each of the final writing samples. And in the middle, we have the 3 distinct writing samples. And then to the right of that, you have 3 pre-scored rubrics. Now, you want to make sure that the final sample has the date, and that date should correspond to the work description as well as the pre-scored rubric. So whatever date you're doing the student is doing the writing sample, you want to make sure that they all have the same date. When you do your writing samples, you can use any of these text types. Argument and opinion, which is just stating a claim or a preference, and that can be based on a text or a topic. Informative or explanatory, which conveys facts. Students, especially students that, they want to tell you all the facts they know about dinosaurs, or ideas, or a narrative or prose that tells a story, or poetry. So narrative also includes poetry. And I want to make sure you know this. This is one of those highlightable moments. When you're using entry points, there is only one measurable outcome for entry points. And Kevin will show you this, but I just want to point this out to you so you don't think something's wrong and have to call the department. So the measurable outcome will say student will use primary mode of communication to express or create a writing sample that is a narrative text, and then you're going to add your independence with 75% independence. Now, where I have it highlighted, that will change according to the text type you choose. You may do any of those text types. You can do all 3 final samples in the same text type if you'd like, but perhaps you're working on opinions and you want to do an opinion one, but then later you're working on a narrative. You can change and have 2 be on a narrative and 1 be on opinion. The only thing that it will do is create a new strand cover sheet. And sometimes teachers get a little concerned, like, why do I have another strand cover sheet? It's just the way that the program works, and Kevin can show you that. But feel free to use any of those text types or just one of the same. So what you're going to do is you're going to pre-score your final writing samples. Now below you see there are 2 examples of graphic organizers. If you're using something like this, that would be considered a baseline. Probably you would use that for a baseline, not your final. And that doesn't need a rubric. You're only going to complete a rubric for the final writing sample. And scorers will verify your scores. So let's talk about the scoring rubric for a minute. What does it include? It's going to include the level of complexity, and that level of complexity is either going to be access skills or entry points. That's all you need to worry about on that first line. I'll show it to you in a moment. The next area is called the demonstration of skills and concepts. This is where we're going to get the accuracy from. These 4 areas are what we're going to really focus on, and you're going to look at that criteria in each of those areas. So we have expressions of ideas and content, knowledge of conventions, text structure, and use of vocabulary. The independence be by the word or the sentence. So you're going to do that by, if the student is only using 4 or 5 words, you would probably do your prompts based on the per word. However, if your student maybe is able to tell you and perhaps able to give you a full sentence, you may want to do your prompts by the sentence. Self-evaluation is not on the rubric. It's separate from the rubric. There is room on the work description label that you can say, see attached, or the student chose the topic, or however you want to tell us, or you can give us a separate piece of paper with the self-evaluation. And we have, if you remember, if you came to the core ideas, we have a long list of ways to self-evaluate. So this is what the rubric looks like. And you'll see at the top what I was talking about, that level of complexity. It's either a 2 for access skill or a 3 for entry point. And those 4 areas, the demonstration of skills, those are the areas you're going to look at that criteria. So you're going to review each of the criteria on that rubric. And I would do that kind of first, see what you're looking for. And your student may be a 1, but maybe by the end of the year, they could be a 2. This is the only time I'm going to tell you you should do your baseline like tomorrow, and then take your time collecting those final samples. There's plenty of opportunities between now and March to get 3 final samples. So you want to try to keep working on the student, helping them to grow and maybe move up from a 1 to a 2. But you'll have ample opportunities to do that. If your student is working on access skills, or if the student is only able to fill in the blank on a worksheet or use single words or pictures, then the score will be a 1 in all 4 of those demonstration of skills and concepts. And we'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And the percent of independence, as I said, is based on the number of prompts relative to the total number of words or sentences. And how that works is, let's say this is a great time of year and the kids have gone to the pumpkin patch. And so they're going to come back to the classroom and they're going to talk about what they saw. And so some kids are drawing, some kids are writing, some kids are telling you things. If you help the student to get more words or more information on the paper than they had, that would be a prompt. So for example, the student writes pumpkin. And so you say to the student, well, was it a big pumpkin? Was it a small pumpkin? You're helping them to fill in those blanks, right? You're giving them more information on the paper than they would have had, which is great. You're teaching them how to do that, but it's a prompt. Okay, so that's how you're going to do your percentage of independence. And the scores are based on the student's contribution, not on what you are able to do or your paraprofessional that's working with them. And the only thing that scores will do is they're going to verify the teacher's score. So you must fill out that rubric because the scores are going to verify the teacher's score. You are there with your student. You know how this evidence came about. But if the scores don't align with the evidence, say you're just doing single words and you give them scores of 4, we will change those scores to reflect the evidence. So we're going to give you a chance to fill out the rubric so you get a little bit of an idea of what it would be like. So let's say Lacey is in your class and she comes back from the Thanksgiving holiday and you're going to scribe for her. And she says, I eat potatoes, turkey, apple pie. That's your writing sample. That's one of your final writing samples. So here's our rubric. Okay, and we're going to do a poll. So you're going to be working just on that demonstration of skills and concepts. We already know its entry points, so you don't have to worry about that. This is what the poll is going to look like. We're going to do one at a time. So we have the writing sample in the right-hand corner. And then we're going to start the poll with the expressions of ideas and content. So you're going to read each of those criteria. And when the poll comes up, you'll determine whether you would give this a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then we'll come back and check and see what my thought is on that. All right. So it looks like we ended at 79%. So I will share the results. 15% of you thought it would be a 1. 57% of you thought it would be a 2. 24% of you thought it would be a 3. Ooh, and we had a very small amount thinking it would be a 4. So let's take a look. So let's take a look at each of those criteria. No main idea, point of view, event. Was it unclear, off topic? I would say no. I would move on from 1. All the text was not provided because it was scribed, and that's what Lacey told the teacher. 2 says it was related minimally. Only 1 detail or description. Did they use pictures? No. Figurative language? No, because it wasn't poetry. So I would say it was related to the assignment minimally and included no or 1 detail. So if I was scoring this, would give it a 2. That would be mine. It can't be a 4 because it wasn't 3 or more accurate, relevant facts. And it can't be a 3, right? Limited use of facts, detail, or descriptions, repetitive, off topic. No. But if you gave it a 3, we wouldn't change it. But I would give it a 3. 2, excuse me. So let's work on the next one. Let's go to knowledge of conventions. Read those and then fill out your poll based on that criteria. Let's see how many of you we can get. Let's get up to 80% at least. That's my criteria for mastery for all of you. Just can't make 80%. Okay. Oh, we did 80%. Yay. Okay, let's share these results. So we had a small percentage thought a 1. The majority thought a 2. Just 1% thought 4, and 17% used 3. So let's take a look. This is knowledge of conventions. So little or no original text. Well, that's not true, right? Because the student told us what it was. General meaning could be understood, though use of grammar was limited and/or contained errors. I'd say that's where I would stop. That would be me. Because 3 has complete sentences with some errors. It does have 1. Correct noun and verb agreement. I would have stopped at 2. That would have been where I stopped. Okay, let's go on to the text structure. What do you think you would give it for the text structure? Okay, 79%. Share the results, and you can see overwhelming majority went to 2. And I totally agree. When you read 2 sentence fragments, phrases, or 1 complete sentence used to express ideas, that's perfect. That's where I would have stopped, right? And 1 more. So hopefully you get the idea. We're on to the use of vocabulary. Okay. So what do you think in this vocabulary piece? So as you can see, we have overwhelming on 2 and about 19% on 3. And nobody gave it a 4. That's good. So I'm going to stop sharing. And if you look at this one, the 2 was related to the assignment, but word choice was limited. It's not inappropriate, but it was definitely limited. I could see some of you giving it a 3 because it is functional and relevant with basic common words, but it doesn't have any descriptive language. Like if they had said, sweet potatoes or, I don't know, something added to it. So I personally would have given it a 2. But I bet if I asked the panel that there might have been some 3s in there. But again, we're only going to verify what you score, but you must score these rubrics. We can't score them for you. Okay? Hopefully you feel a little better about what that rubric is all about. Now, if you have a student that is working at the access skill level, your measurable outcomes are going to be different. They're going to be more than one. You'll have multiple ones because your student's working at a different outcome. So in this case, the measurable outcome says that the student will activate a device within 15 seconds of the initial cue in an activity related to the creation of a written product. So do you see that? In an activity related to the creation of a written product. So the brief description tells us that within the 15 seconds of the initial cue, the student activated a switch with pre-recorded sentences to compose a narrative on her winter vacation. So the student was not writing, the student was activating the switch, but you have a permanent product here. This could go up on the board with the other students' writings that he talks about what the winter break was like. And it looks like they need more practice on activating the switch because they were 25% independent. In this case, if you are working with a student where you are providing the information and the student may be working on something like activating a switch, when you go into the program, and Kevin will show you this in a moment, as soon as you click on 2 for access skill, my student is addressing writing through access skills, it will automatically pre-populate the demonstration of skills and concepts as a 1 because you are providing the text in all areas. So it will automatically be a 1 in all those areas. Some of our students using a dynamic display are learning how to put words together. And it is helpful for us, for scorers, to see the supporting documentation by taking a screenshot. Students are just learning how to get into these displays, learning how to pick the category and then find what they're looking for. They need a lot of practice to learn how to do this. So sometimes giving us the supporting documentation and then showing us like how they marked it, where the help was, where the prompting was, it's helpful. You'll still have your final writing sample, but this is great supporting documentation. So just kind of want to summarize and some reminders that there's no data chart. So if you came yesterday or last week when we did the core concepts, we talked a lot about data charts. The writing requirements are no data charts. You're going to make sure you have a work sample description label for each of the writing samples. You must have the student generate the communication, the expressive communication. Work with your speech and language person. Have them help you get some techniques. Let them get some samples for you. Students at the access skill level are still going to have a final written product that represents how the student participated in that creation, that sample. And I think we nipped this in the bud, but no samples, including bathroom related routines, are going to be scored and they won't be counted towards the minimum requirement. I know that bathroom routines are very important for your students, but they're not to be included in our assessment pieces. So, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you and you can show them how this all works.
Thank you, Deb. Good afternoon, everybody. So once again, give me just a moment and I'm going to change gears. I'll stop the PowerPoint and I'll bring up forms and graphs and we can take a look at how to create all the things Deb just told you about for writing. So one moment. Okay, so here we are back on the login page for forms and graphs. I'm not going to walk through all the steps that we did previously to create account and build students. This is just going to focus straight on what you need to do for writing. And we still got our friend Alex Keaton sitting here from the math sample we built. ELA Writing is a requirement for all grades 3 through 8 and at 10 for high school. So we'll use Alex at grade 5 as our example. So let's select the student we have. We'll jump into Alex. And just a reminder, the core content, this is where you can get at the cover sheet, the overall kind of demographics for the student, and then where you go most of the time is the skill survey and the strand covers. So we know every strand needs a skill survey, so that's where, excuse me, we're going to start. So we'll click skill survey list. I've already done this the other day. Let's pretend that that's not there. So I'll get that out of there. So coming to this, if you haven't done writing for the student, you'll first need to add a skill survey. So let's click add a new skill survey. And then you get a new generic line that you can launch. And you'll notice there's 3 different choices for ELA. We've got language, writing, reading, and then writing. And it's not going to offer a separate skill survey for the text type of narrative or any of that. There's just one generic skill survey that covers all of it. So for writing, we will select writing, and then we'll go. So we'll give it a date. And then just like all the other skill surveys we looked at for math and the other ELA strands, this time we only have 9 different skills to make a selection on. And remember, you have to make a choice in this case for each of the 9 that you see here. So you have to make a choice from either column A, B, C, or D, depending on what the student is able to do. So let's just drop some in so we can get past this. So we've made a choice for each of these. And we can save. And just a reminder, when you save or leave this page and come back, if you've made a choice, they'll turn green. It's a nice way to find if you skipped one, it won't turn green. So just to make sure you've met the requirement of making a choice for all of them, it's just a nice visual cue. But now let's go back to our table of contents, and we've done our skill survey. So now we can start to create a writing strand. So let's open the strand list. We've got our math that we've already worked on, but let's add a writing. So I clicked add a new strand in the red bar. I know I want English language arts. And here we do have a choice. So it's not just generic writing. Now we see it broken down by those text types of opinion, argument, informative, and narrative. They do all work the same. It's just about the content that wraps around them. So I'll show you one, but no, the choice is yours. We'll do it all in one, and then I'll show if you want to mix and match how you can do that at the very end. But just for sake of demonstration, let's go with opinion argument. So I select it. And so far, it's kind of looking the same of what we're used to. We've got the top of the strand cover sheet filled out. It's started with what it knows of what strand we're in, what content area. We still have our list of learning standards. There's not very many, depending on what text type you're in. You can open the full resource guide and look at those learning standards. But since there's so few, you can also just make a selection, click get LS text, and then once you see that text drop in, that's how you know which is which and what you've saved to your strand cover sheet. Just remember, big red button, click get LS text, and it'll drop in that learning standard text. We will skip level of complexity again. You remember when we did that math, it'll do it for us, and it'll do the same thing here, but it is a little bit different in the sense of entry points and access skills. I still have this measurable outcome box, but when I click find entry points, it's going to look a little different. Gone are all those grade tabs from high school down to pre-K. I only have one tab that's generic for all grades, because you'll notice there's only one entry point. As Deb pointed out, it's the primary mode of communication. In this case, it's a opinion argument. But if you are doing access skills, so entry point, you only have that one choice, but you'll notice the access skills, because it's about that particular access skills. Are they moving materials? Are they activating a device? So you have choices for access skills of exactly how you're going to approach the skill with the student. So you have quite a lengthy list to scroll down for your access skills, but no switching between tabs. You don't need to spiral up or down. The only choice you have to make is entry points, which are most students, and then access skills if they so choose. So we'll go with entry points, and it's just as simple as clicking entry points, and it'll function similarly. It'll grab the student's first name, tack on will, and the slight difference is instead of saying XX accuracy and XX independence, it's just asking for independence, because we get that accuracy by way of you completing the rubrics for each of those 3 final samples that you do. So we'll give it a 80% independence goal. And again, here's box 6, and maybe you use this, maybe you don't. Maybe more commonly used in writing, if you know you're scribing everything, or if there's an approach that you're doing with their form of communication, you can describe it here. Remember, it doesn't have to be everything that's in their IEP. It's just about related to the evidence that you're submitting for this particular sample and strand that you're in. But it is just a text box for you to give us some descriptive language about any of these accommodations or their communication system, or any of the sort of helpful description that you can that clues in somebody from the outside looking at the samples that have been created. It's just a big text box. So then we get down to the bottom, and this is where the real function of this page comes in. Notice all we have is 3 different things, no data charts. You don't have to do data charts. It's not even giving you the opportunity to create a data chart because it's not needed. All you need to do is, you remember if we're going to stick with opinion argument, I need to do 1 baseline and then 3 final work descriptions with evidence, and then a rubric for each of those 3. So let's build out kind of what that would look like to set up. So we do a baseline. I click on baseline, and I get a baseline. And then I know after that baseline, I need to do a final, and then a rubric, and then a final, and then a rubric. And guess what? A final, and then a rubric. So in kind of the layout, that's a complete submission for ELA. Obviously, you still need to go and complete those and do the work and score the rubrics. But as far as what's required, you're looking right at it. You have a baseline. Notice no rubric on the baseline. Just be it a graphic organizer, a rough draft, whatever that first sort of attempt that you do, a baseline, just as a sample, no rubric needed for it. And then your 3 finals with your 3 rubrics. So let's take a look what's required on each of these. We'll look at baseline and file. Just know they're functionally the same. It's just one says baseline and one says final. So when we go in, we'll ask for, remember, we're looking at the baseline here at the top. So we'll pretend we did it today. And then describe what it happened. How did the student, what method did you use to create whatever sample that you're attaching for that baseline? And then if you're scribing, it's a great place to put it there. A lot of people say that it was scribed in this description, and then on the physical sample itself, they write scribed just to make it obvious that it's clearly in somebody other than the student's handwriting or generated a different way. Scribed is a good thing to put in multiple places to really drive it home. And then self-evaluation, again, you can describe the choice a student made, or if you've got that separate sheet, you can say see attached and attach it there. But that's really about it, other than naming the independence that the student had when creating that sample. So date, independence, description, and self-eval is all you need to do to fill that out, and that's the baseline. Excuse me. So let's save this. We'll go back to the string cover sheet here in the red bar, and it'll take us right back to where we were. And then let's look at a final. So we'll do one sample of a final with a rubric. This is where I didn't point it out in baseline because you only have one of them, but this little my description box is probably the most helpful in writing. And all this does is it's just there for you to know a little breadcrumb for yourself to have some idea what that work description label is linked to. So in Lacey's case, maybe we write Thanksgiving, and I'll show you quickly if I save. If I go back to that string cover sheet, anything I write in that little yellow box, it just puts here. So I know this one's that sample, and then maybe I have my second one's about snowmen, and then the third one's about something else. So you don't have to use it. That's its only purpose, is for you to know which one of these is what, because they're all generically named work sample final. So that's the whole purpose behind that my description. But let's go back in and we'll see what else it's asking for. And you'll notice it's asking for the exact same thing that the baseline. The only difference is that this is a final and the baseline was a baseline, but functionally the same. You've got a big text box to describe what the student did to create that writing sample, and any supports or process that was used. You've got your date, and then self-eval again. So pretty straightforward, not that much different than any of the other work samples description labels that we've used in other strands. But the thing that is different is the idea of that rubric. So let's go down. So we've got our Thanksgiving sample, and then let's go into the rubric that's right under it. So a lot of people like to kind of match it just so that they know one rubric from another. You don't have to if you just assume that whatever you had underneath your sample attaches to that, but that's the whole point of that description. If you want to give yourself a little ID, then you certainly can. So in the rubric, date should always match whatever the date of the sample was. I'm just using today's date as an example, but whatever you put on that work description label should go here as well. And then we've got the rubric. So you've seen it in the PowerPoint, but the only real difference is now it will function based on what I click. So if you'll notice if I hover over, it might be hard to see in your Zoom, but it changes to a little hand. So I can just hover and click, and it'll turn this kind of purpley blue color. And that's how you select. I know I was working on entry points, so I'm going to select level of complexity. Then we get down to those 4 areas that you did in your polls that make up demonstration of skills and concepts of expressions, knowledge, text structure, and vocab. And then same idea, you just hover, click, 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 click. And it's all hover and click until you come to independence. You can hover, notice I don't even get my little hand. You can hover and click all you want on independence. It will not select it. The reason why is we need that actual percentage of independence. And they're average across all 3 samples. So we don't want just the rubric bands. We average the actual percent independence. So we need to know the actual percent for the sample. If we do 85%, it'll automatically select the rubric for you. So just remember, if you are hovering and clicking and it's not happening, look left. Underneath independent, you'll see that drop down, and that's where you give it the actual percentage, and it'll select the rubric score for you. So that's it for the rubric. So let's pop back to the strand cover sheet. And we'll go down to the bottom. So now we've got our first sample with our rubric, and you repeat that 2 more times. I just want to point out, if you are doing access skills, obviously we set this up to be entry points, but I want to demonstrate what happens if you do select an access skill. So let's use that second writing rubric. Let's pop in here. We'll ignore everything else, but just I want you to see what happens. As soon as I click access skills, zoink, it's going to automatically select 1 for all these, because if you're truly working on access skills, you should not be scoring outside of A1. It will not let you make any selection other than 1. If you click it by accident, you can just select entry points again, and then you can change. But every time I click access skills, it's going to automatically select one for you. So don't be surprised if that happens. That's by design. So truly access skills, you're in one, and then obviously you still give it whatever the proper independence is. But these are linked together for access skills. So let's go back to our strand list. So we'll take a quick gander at this again. And again, this is all you'd have to do. If you built all these out with your 3 final samples, each with a rubric, and then just that one baseline, you're done. In this case, we did it all within one text type. The question comes up, well, what if I want to mix and match? So let's pretend, let's get these 2 guys out of here. And we're left with almost done, but not quite. So we still got our baseline. We've got one final work description with the rubric and another final with a rubric, both with the writing samples attached. And this is where you got to kind of take a step back to finish it out if you're going to mix and match. What you need to do, so remember we're doing opinion argument. So let's say we want to do that third one on a narrative. We've done some great work with the student creating narratives, and we want to include that in. All you have to do is you go back, and instead of just having this one strand, you add another strand. And in this case, we'll do ELA, narrative. The learning standards, we have a little bit more this time, but they all change to match to narrative, which is the one change. But the real change is just about getting that new entry point where you notice now it says that is a narrative. And this question comes up a lot. We'll give it the same goal. Do I have to do a baseline again? Absolutely not. If you mix and match, you only have to do one baseline. It doesn't matter which text type it occurs in. You don't, I mean, you could if you wanted to, but it's not required. Don't worry about if you do multiple text types. As long as you did a baseline in at least one of them, that's all you have to do. So in this case, I can skip right over this. All I need to do is one final and one rubric. So I fill those out for, in this case, we're working on a narrative. And then you just need to stitch that all together when you combine it with the work and everything else. So in this case, I have 2, but that's because I'm mixing and matching. You don't have to do 3 of each. It just has to be 3 finals amongst any of those 3 sort of type of text types. 1 of each, all in one, 2 in one. It's up to you, whatever is meaningful for the work that you're doing and the communication you're doing with your student. Let's pop back into opinion argument. I just want to point out, obviously it won't look across the strands if you do multiple, but you still do have this print multiple. And what this will do right at the top, it'll stitch it together of my strand cover sheet. If you do this for both of those strands, you'll get 2 of the skill surveys. You don't have to put them in twice. You can if you want to, but you only need 1 skill survey. It's going to be the same. And then I've got that baseline that I created. And I've got my final and my final. Remember, we only did 2 for this text type. And then to print the rubrics up here, kind of like the bar graphs and line graphs and everything, it'll open those on a separate tab. So they're stitched together a little differently. And here I have my completed rubrics. So you assemble all that. A lot of people stick with the one text type and it'll stitch it all together for you in that one. But if you mix and match, you just have to sort of piece it together on your own because you're going to have two separate paths of strands going. But that's really it. Just remember the overall, you've got your strand cover sheet, you've got your skill survey, one baseline, and any of those text types you want to do, just have to have one, and then 3 separate final examples, description labels with a rubric for each one of them with the actual work attached. So that's pretty much the building blocks of writing. I'll hand it back to Deb now, who will finish it off, and we'll get a chance to look at any questions that might be out there. So back to you, Deb.
Thanks, Kevin. So, so here we are today, right? The writing. So hopefully you've done the core concepts. If you are new, you really need the core concepts before you dive in. Use your educator's manual if you want to get started with your skill survey and go to the forms and graphs and set up your students, but make sure you have the core concepts. If you haven't heard me say, there will be winter sessions where you can actually bring your portfolios. So keep an eye on your inbox and you'll get a message, an update about when they are going to happen and how you can register for those, but they'll be coming up next. So let's see what we have for questions. Okay, Matthew, I think Kevin answered this. Do we have a baseline for every strand? Nope, just one baseline for the writing, just one. And then the 3 final writing samples. We don't need, there isn't a baseline for reading or writing unless you're talking about a skill survey. If you're mixing that up, there's a skill survey for every strand, but writing is the only one that has a baseline. And you can get all this information in the educator's manual and it's very clearly written out for you. I think, it's important, we talked about yesterday at the core concepts, is that you want to integrate it into your daily instruction. So it's not an extra add-on. Our teachers are always doing ELA and working with their students to read to them and, doing all the academic pieces of it. I just want to incorporate it, our assessment right in there. So it's not an extra burden. You have to take time to input the data, but that's something we talked about yesterday as well. Go to your administrator and get some time to input your information once a week. All right. I think we got the bulk of our questions.
Well, and I know you mentioned this, Deb, and so did Kevin, but we really want to thank everyone for paying attention, for signing up for this training. We really do hope you find the information valuable, at least part of it. It's our effort to try to make this as approachable as possible. And thank you for attending. If you have questions, like I said, certainly email them or, use some of the website and the email address that Deb provided. But we wish you a great fall, and hopefully you can enjoy the rest of the day.